If you enjoyed the story, let me know in the comments where are you listening from and what time of day is it for you? Morning, afternoon, or late at night? I'd love to know how far these stories travel. And tell me, do you enjoy the narration style? Your feedback helps me make each episode better. Thank you for being here. They say scent is the most powerful sense tied to memory. But what if I told you a single drop of oil could command armies, seduce emperors, and guard the secrets of a dying empire? In the golden halls of Constantinople, behind silk-draped screens and marble baths, Byzantine women and men alike turned fragrance into power. Not just decoration, a weapon. A ritual. A language. Each vial, a spell whispered through centuries. But few know how it was made. Not the modern sprays or sweet perfumes we find in today's stores. I'm talking about thick, musky elixirs brewed in bronze cauldrons, perfumed pastes crushed with ivory pestles, and oils fermented so long they outlived the people who wore them. Ingredients crossed oceans to arrive here. Frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from Ethiopia, roses from Persia, spikenard from the Himalayas, and musk painfully extracted from wild deer in Tibet. And yet, Byzantium didn't just import. They invented, modified, refined. Take narthex, an early perfume base thicker than modern bombs, prepared from resin and infused with dozens of ingredients. A single pot might require 2 months of aging, stored in shaded clay jars, stirred only at dawn. Why dawn? Because according to one Byzantine scroll, sunlight distorts the soul of the fragrance. They believed aroma had a spirit, a living essence that could be spoiled by haste or disrespect. In some royal courts, perfuming was more sacred than prayer. Women were bathed in scented waters, then anointed by handmaidens with complex mixtures passed down from mother to daughter. One blend, nicknamed the Breath of Hera, was said to require violet, crushed saffron, and distilled pine. A noblewoman's chamber smelled not of vanity, but of myth. Even soldiers carried scent. Leather armor might be rubbed with spiced oil to hide the stench of sweat and fear. More than once, chroniclers mentioned generals arriving at court trailing the scent of cinnamon and wormwood. Perfume wasn't just pleasure. It was presence, identity, memory, status. And then there were the rituals. Before a Byzantine bride entered her husband's house, she was massaged with olive oil steeped in laurel leaves and cloves. Not just for softness, but to seal her to her new role. The priestess perfumers whispered prayers over her skin, believing the scent would protect her from jealousy, sickness, and evil eyes. But scent wasn't only sacred. It was also dangerous. One empress, Theodora, was rumored to poison her rivals through perfume. A drop of oil behind the ear, they said, could drive a man mad or drop him dead in his throne. While we can't prove the story, Byzantine apothecaries were masters of both perfume and poison. Sometimes the two were only a breath apart. And yet, for all the secrecy, recipes survived. Tucked in forgotten codices. Scribbled in monastic margins. Hidden behind codes, metaphors, and riddles. For instance, a fragment discovered in Mount Athos reads, to capture the scent of thunder, distill lightning's flower with the tears of night. A poetic way of saying, mix iris root with jasmine and night-blooming tuberose. But let's stop for a second. Why did Byzantines care so deeply about scent? Because they believed it connected them to the divine. In churches, priests swung heavy censers filled with burning incense. Scent became a ladder to heaven. The faithful breathed in holiness. The empire breathed in sanctity. And emperors, believing themselves chosen by God, wore perfumes no commoner could afford or even name. One blend used only for coronations involved ambergris, a rare substance found in whale intestines worth more than gold. And yet, beauty was not just for the rich. Even market women had their secrets. Poppy oil for hair. Vinegar infusions with rose petals. Ground basil applied to the neck before trade negotiations. Why? Because a pleasant scent softened deals, turned arguments into laughter, made a rival relax his guard. Everyone, from prostitute to princess, wielded perfume like magic. But the real art? That lived in the making. You couldn't just throw flowers into water. No. True Byzantine perfumery required time, heat, patience, and obsession. Each mixture had a story, a season when it must be made, a star under which it must begin, a sacred silence in which it must rest. Perfume wasn't created. It was conjured. And so were the beauty rituals. Want to know how Byzantine women removed facial hair? Or made their skin glow under candlelight? Why they painted their lips with crushed mulberries or treated wrinkles with eagle fat? The answers will surprise you. In the quiet of a Byzantine bathhouse, steam rising like incense, a woman sat still as her maid prepared the depilation paste. A mixture of resin, lime, and ground seashells, potent, stinging, but effective. They didn't just remove hair for beauty. It was ritual purification. Hair trapped scent, they believed, and scent carried energy, both divine and dangerous. Afterward, her skin would be soothed with oil of chamomile or goat's milk, sometimes both, followed by a layer of beeswax mixed with rosewater. The result? Skin so smooth it was said to catch moonlight. Cosmetics weren't an afterthought, they were armor. Lip color was drawn from crushed berries, wine sediment, or even hematite powder. Eyes were lined with antimony paste, not only to deepen the gaze but to reflect status and protect against evil airs. And cheeks? Not pink powder. A mix of red ochre and crushed pomegranate seeds carefully dabbed and blended with fingertips dipped in oil. But there's a deeper layer. Behind every mirror stood fear. Fear of aging. Fear of losing favor. Fear of becoming invisible. For in the empire, beauty meant currency. The emperor's gaze could be won or lost in a single glance. So women and men labored over their appearance not just for love or pride, but survival. One curious ritual involved bathing at dawn in water where silver coins had rested overnight. The belief? Silver purified and brought clarity. The face washed in such water was believed to reflect truth and deflect lies. Alchemists even claimed certain perfumes could affect memory, cause a lover to remember or an enemy to forget. We now know these claims were more myth than science, but in Byzantium, belief shaped behavior more than proof ever could. And then there were masks. Not the kind worn for disguise, but those spread across the face at night. Honey mixed with egg whites and white clay for tightening. Crushed almonds and goat milk for brightening. There was even one formula that required the ash of burned ivory mixed with milk and applied by moonlight. Instructions warned, do not speak while it dries, lest your words crack your face. But beauty didn't end at the skin. Byzantines believed fragrance was the bridge between flesh and spirit. A well-scented person was seen as more virtuous, more refined, even more intelligent. And in a world where few bathed more than once a week, the strategic use of scent could mean the difference between acceptance and shame. So households stored herbs in linen closets, burned scented woods in the evenings, and sewed sachets into their garments. Even the poor wore herbs marjoram, thyme, and rue, both to cover odor and ward off evil. But there's one place where scent ruled absolutely, the palace. Within the great palace of Constantinople, there existed a hidden chamber called the Aromaticon. Only a handful of eunuchs and perfumers were allowed inside. It held the empire's rarest scents, locked in crystal and gold vessels, each labeled not with names, but with symbols. One scroll describes a ritual where the empress would choose her perfume based on the alignment of stars. Another hints at scent-based omens. If a blend soured before its time, it was a sign of betrayal within the court. This wasn't vanity. It was code. A secret language written in vapor. And still, there was more. Imagine a market street near the Forum of Constantine, the smell of bread mingling with the sharp sting of vinegar, incense curling from church doors, and somewhere, from a shaded stall, the rich scent of attar of roses. A merchant beckons you with a vial, and with it, a story. He tells you the rose oil was pressed under a full moon. That the petals were harvested by virgins fasting from speech. That the mixture cured melancholy and sparked desire. Do you believe him? Maybe not. But you still buy it. Because in Byzantium every scent was a story and every story was a truth of its own kind. Even the dead were not spared. Bodies were wrapped with herbs and oils so that in the afterlife they would arrive fragrant, holy, ready. Scent was not just of the body, it was of the soul. Without it, one could not be recognized among the divine. The Byzantines believed what you smelled like said more about you than your words ever could. Cleanliness was next to godliness, but fragrance? That was godliness distilled. But not all scents whispered of holiness. Some reeked of secrets. In the dim corridors of monasteries where candles flickered and chants echoed, monks quietly experimented. While officially forbidden to indulge in luxury, some sought higher truths through the study of scent. Cloistered apothecaries distilled herbs not just for healing, but for revelation. Lavender to calm the mind. Basil to ward off temptation. Myrrh to induce visions. One monk recorded a formula that, when burned, was said to open the ear of the soul. Did it? Or was it merely the power of suggestion? Byzantium thrived on that fine edge between belief and knowledge. The perfume makers were part artist, part magician, part chemist. They didn't simply follow recipes, they interpreted dreams. There's evidence that some scents were made not to be pleasant, but to provoke. One rare formula, made from burnt leather, dried blood, and wormwood, was used only during war ceremonies. Soldiers smeared it on their arms before battle. Not for intimidation. For connection. They believed the dead could recognize their kin through the scent, that fallen ancestors would march with them if they carried the right aroma. But even more curious were the perfumes of seduction. They weren't always sweet. The most powerful love blends often smelled strange, earthy, smoky, aged. Byzantines understood instinct long before it had a name. That humans are drawn not just to beauty, but to complexity. A lover's perfume might include amber, civet, musk, and even trace amounts of body oils aged for weeks. To modern ears, it may sound unpleasant, but to Byzantine noses, it smelled like fire and longing. And fire is exactly what many of them played with. In the imperial gardens, surrounded by night-blooming jasmine and shaded myrtle, lovers met under cloaks of perfume. No words needed. One scent said, "Wait for me." Another said, "I am yours." The city itself carried the language. You could walk down the Misi, the Grand Boulevard, and guess someone's rank, trade, or origin simply by what trailed behind them. This wasn't just luxury. It was infrastructure. Byzantine cities had scent laws. Merchants couldn't wear the same perfume as nobles. Commoners could be fined for mimicking the empress's blend. Some perfumes were registered, protected, like trademarks. To imitate was not just theft. It was treason. And yet, perfumes spread. Through the hands of travelers, spies, slaves, lovers. Secret formulas crossed borders in stitched hems or whispered over bread. The scent of Byzantium made its way to Venice, to Baghdad, to the courts of Charlemagne. It left a trail no map could trace, yet one the nose could always follow. One story tells of a diplomat from the Abbasid Caliphate who visited the Byzantine court. He returned with a vial of oil so potent it clung to his garments for over a month. When asked what it was made of, he replied, "I do not know. But I have dreamed of the empress every night since I wore it." Dreams and desire, power and prayer, all carried by scent. And what of the artisans themselves? Few were named. Few are still remembered. But we catch glimpses. A widow in Antioch who sold rose oil to fund her daughter's dowry. A blind monk who could identify 80 herbs by smell alone. A girl called Kyriaki whose hands were so skilled at blending, her oils were said to soften the heart of marble. These weren't just workers. They were alchemists of identity. Their work lived not in galleries or books, but on skin, in air, in memory. The Byzantines believed that to wear a scent was to wear a story. That with each application you chose who you were or who you wanted others to believe you were. In a world of rigid roles, perfume offered transformation. Even rebellion. A peasant girl might anoint herself with stolen lilac oil before visiting a noble house. A eunuch might wear vetiver and cedar to echo the power denied to him. A fading courtesan might wear the same scent that once won her youth, hoping the memory would linger just a little longer. And sometimes it did. Because scent lingers where words are forgotten. Long after the empire crumbled, after mosaics shattered and scrolls burned, the recipes remained. Whispered in apothecaries, reinvented in Eastern bazaars, rediscovered by modern perfumers. Today, when you open a bottle of rose attar or inhale frankincense in a cathedral, you are breathing Byzantium. You are breathing ghosts. Imagine the empress alone in her chamber just before dawn. Her servants dismissed, curtains drawn. She kneels beside a silver basin filled with warm water steeped in crushed bay leaves and saffron. The ritual begins not with makeup but with silence. For in Byzantium, beauty was not only about display, it was also devotion. Every gesture, every preparation was layered with meaning. She dips a cloth into the water and presses it to her face 3 times. Past, present, future. A symbolic washing not only of skin but of burdens. Then, from an ornate box, she selects a vial no larger than a thumbnail. Inside, a perfume so dense it gleams like honey. It's made from roses gathered in the brief blush of dawn and soaked in sandalwood oil for a full year. She touches it to her wrists, behind her ears, and between her breasts. This isn't about attraction. It's armor. A statement. A boundary drawn with scent. Because in the palace, politics danced on invisible threads. One wrong word. One rumor. One misplaced favor, and even the empress could fall. But fragrance gave her control over how she was perceived. The right scent could soften enemies, revive allies, or ignite suspicion with a whisper. Scent didn't just announce you. It followed you. Spoke for you after you left. It left shadows in the minds of others. Some emperors reportedly chose their wives based on the memory of a single scent lingering in an antechamber. In a world ruled by image and ceremony, perfume was power without sound. Even the church understood this. Incense wasn't just ritual, it was theater. The rising smoke, the changing light, the sudden burst of myrrh as the censer swung, all of it designed to seduce the senses, to draw worshippers out of the earthly and into the divine. When the faithful inhaled incense, they were breathing the holy. It was meant to intoxicate the soul. And yet, the line between sacred and profane was razor thin. One bishop, in a secret letter, warned that certain perfumes used in private homes could mimic the scent of angels and lead to sinful dreams. He claimed a woman in Thessaloniki had induced lust in a deacon simply by walking past him wearing a perfume called Knight's Promise, said to be made from black orchid, burnt clove, and a rare resin that bloomed only once every 30 years. Stories like these weren't rare, they were warnings. Perfume, while heavenly, could also be heresy. This fear led to the rise of coded perfumery. Artisans began creating blends with secret structures. Two people might wear the same perfume, but only those who knew the correct layering, base, middle, and top notes would unlock its full scent. A blend that smelled like simple lemon on the surface might reveal cinnamon, honey, and civet minutes later, unfolding like a poem. Some formulas were even written as riddles. One fragment reads, "To smell of dusk and memory combine the voice of a lion, the skin of spring, and the breath of old stone." Modern scholars believe this refers to ambergris, violet, and petrichor oil, the last distilled from earth after rain. But in Byzantium, decoding scent was an elite skill. Nobles trained their daughters in it. Lovers tested one another with it. Spies used it to identify allies in foreign courts. Yes, spies. Perfume became a medium of espionage. Letters written in invisible ink revealed themselves only when exposed to specific scents. Seals on scrolls were broken and replaced using warm oils to soften wax. A merchant might carry a blend unique to Constantinople, proving their origin without a word. There are even accounts of political prisoners recognizing their captors by the scent on their robes. In a time without fingerprints or cameras, memory of scent became a defense or a weapon. But what of those who made the scents? They lived in shadow. Rarely painted, rarely praised, often enslaved or indentured. And yet, they shaped the very heart of the empire. Some were women from far-off lands brought in for their nose, a term meaning not just sensitivity to smell, but a deep intuition for harmony. Others were herbalists or exiles who'd learned their craft in silence. And then there were the witches. At least, that's what they were called. Women who lived on the city's edge, working with strange roots and oils no one else would touch. Some sold remedies. Others sold curses. But all trafficked in scent. Their perfumes didn't make you beautiful. They made you feared, desired, obeyed. One notorious recipe called the Widow's Whisper was said to render men silent in your presence. Another, the hourglass, supposedly made the wearer forget their grief for exactly 3 days. After that, sorrow returned doubled. Were they real? Were they legend? In Byzantium, the two were rarely separate. As Constantinople thrived, its scent culture deepened. Perfume wasn't limited to elites anymore. It filtered through layers of society, adapted, reshaped, reborn. In the crowded quarters near the harbor where spice ships unloaded their treasures from Alexandria and Antioch, the air was thick with competing aromas, cinnamon bark drying in nets, crates of clove and anise, saffron packed in wax. These weren't just trade goods. They were dreams in containers. Among these stalls, local perfumers emerged, humble, clever, resourceful. They didn't have the exotic ingredients of the palace, but they had ingenuity. Dried orange peel, crushed ivy, soot from burned olive wood. They used wine leaves as a base and distilled oils in clay pots over low fire. Their perfumes didn't smell royal, but they smelled alive. There was one alley, locals said, where you could follow the scent of basil and pine to a woman known only as Mother Dust. She made perfumes for sailors, scribes, widows, anyone who brought a coin or a secret. Her rule was simple: tell me who you've lost and I'll give you a scent to remember or forget. She wasn't the only one. Midwives made perfumes for birth rituals, calming oils of lavender, fennel, and dill, believed to ease labor and welcome infants with sweetness. Some infants were anointed with frankincense on the forehead, not just for health, but to invite divine favor. Birth and death alike were wrapped in scent, tying human transitions to sacred space. In marketplaces, lovers traded scented gloves. A girl might hide a vial of rose oil in her sleeve and brush against her beloved, a silent message. A boy might dab his neck with myrtle water before confessing affection. Sometimes a failed courtship ended with the return of a cloth that no longer smelled of the giver. The perfume gone. The bond broken. Scent then was language. A way of speaking when speech failed. And what of the enemies of scent? There were purists, ascetics, and zealots who believed perfumes were distractions, temptations that drew the soul away from God. They cited saints who had lived without fragrance, whose bodies, it was said, emitted holy scents after death. True purity, they wrote, needs no adornment. But even among these critics, few dared to remove incense from worship. For all their warnings, even they craved the sacred aroma that lifted prayers to the heavens. One monk wrote of a paradox: "I condemn the flesh that craves fragrance, yet I weep when the censer swings." In that confession lies the core of Byzantium, a world of contradictions. Perfume was both sacred and sinful, a way to rise or fall, to become more than yourself or to lose yourself entirely. And in the heart of this world, scent became a kind of time machine. Ancient perfumes were stored in tightly sealed alabaster jars passed down through families like relics. Some were opened only once a year, during feasts or funerals. Others were kept sealed for generations, with instructions never to be touched unless the empire itself was in danger, as if the very scent might bring back the past or awaken something lost. One noble family reportedly kept a bottle labeled only with a date, 537 AD. No name, no description, only the year. What did it smell like? What did it mean? No one knows. But the bottle remained sealed for centuries, as if holding memory itself hostage. Modern historians can analyze ingredients, reconstruct blends, and guess at proportions. But scent resists full resurrection. It is the most ephemeral of arts, made to vanish, to transform, to haunt. A perfume from 1,000 years ago may be rebuilt, but it will never be the same. The hands that mixed it, the breath that wore it, the world that shaped it, all gone. And yet something lingers. Not just in archives, but in us. Because we are still Byzantium's heirs. Still captivated by scent. Still drawn to the idea that who we are can be changed, not by sword or sermon, but by a bottle no bigger than a thumb, carried close to the skin. Centuries may have passed, but the desire behind scent remains unchanged, the hunger to be remembered, to be desired, to be more than flesh and bone. Byzantines understood this better than most. In their world, perfume was not a luxury. It was memory, disguise, confession, and ambition. And nowhere was this more evident than in the rituals of mourning. When someone of high status died in Byzantium, their body was not immediately buried. It was washed with oils, not to mask decay, but to honor the soul's departure. The scent of death was softened by the breath of flowers. They used oils of cypress, hyssop, and spikenard, the same blend said to have been poured on Christ's feet. To the Byzantines, this was not imitation, it was invocation. A way of reminding heaven to receive another soul. The dead were anointed as kings, even if they were beggars. And their burial cloths were often steeped in perfume. Some believed this helped ease the journey to the afterlife. Others believed the scent would comfort those left behind. One record speaks of a widow who returned to her husband's grave every year with the same vial of myrrh. She poured a single drop onto the earth. "So you'll remember me," she whispered. Grief had a scent. So did love. And so did power. The emperors of Byzantium were not simply rulers. They were symbols, living icons. And every aspect of their presentation, from robes to gestures to fragrance, was crafted to maintain that illusion. Before audiences, the emperor would be perfumed by 3 attendants, each representing a different virtue. One applied a citrus blend for clarity. Another, a heavy resin for strength. The third, a floral oil for mercy. Together, they created a persona, wise, strong, compassionate. But it wasn't just the emperor who wore this mask. In court, alliances were built or broken by scent. A noblewoman might wear a variant of the empress's perfume to signal loyalty. Or she might blend in a bitter note to suggest rebellion. These messages were rarely spoken aloud. To interpret them was a dangerous game. But in Byzantium, the unspoken ruled more than any decree. Even in private life, scent shaped identity. For Byzantine brides, the wedding night was preceded by a purification ritual. She would soak in a bath perfumed with iris, chamomile, and cinnamon. Her hair would be combed with rose oil and braided with ribbons dipped in jasmine. These preparations were not just for pleasure, they were symbolic. Iris for wisdom, chamomile for harmony, cinnamon for passion. Her scent became a prayer for her future. And for the groom? He too was washed and perfumed, with fir resin, cedarwood, and laurel, symbols of strength, loyalty, and divine favor. Together, their bodies formed a union of fragrance. In Byzantium, this wasn't mere romance. It was ceremony, alchemy, the joining of 2 souls under heaven's nose. Even their bedchambers were scented, cushions stuffed with dried herbs, walls washed in orange blossom water, a small brazier burning sandalwood and clove. The Byzantines believed the first breath shared by husband and wife should be beautiful, for it would echo across their lives. But not all unions were so fortunate. There were tales of women who poisoned their husbands' perfumes, not to kill, but to weaken. A drop of henbane oil mixed with musk was said to cloud the mind. Another blend, using belladonna and poppy resin, caused vivid dreams and forgetfulness. These were whispered remedies, passed from mother to daughter, sometimes in warning, sometimes in hope. Not all perfumes were meant to heal. Some were crafted to seduce, others to ensnare, and some to liberate. In the darker alleys of Constantinople, where laws blurred and morality bent, scent became a form of resistance. Women who had no voice, beggars, slaves, dancers, used perfume not to attract, but to reclaim control. One such woman, remembered only as Thalassa, was said to wear a scent made from burnt fig leaves and vinegar. It didn't smell pleasant. It smelled defiant. The kind of scent that made men turn their heads not in desire, but in recognition of something wild, untamed. She walked through markets like a storm. No man dared touch her. Her formula, whispered among the poor, became known as the wall. A scent not to draw others in, but to keep them out. It's easy to forget that scent, like language can say no. But Byzantium knew. It had witnessed how fragrance could shield, shape, and shatter lives. In brothels, scents were used to construct personas. A woman might wear the sweet blend of apple blossom and vanilla to play the ingenue. Another might wear leather, pepper, and smoke to become the seductress. Identities were built with each note. And when the night ended, they were washed away like costumes after a play. This theatricality wasn't limited to women. Male courtiers, too, played with scent. A young advisor might wear narrowly to suggest innocence, even as he schemed in the shadows. An aging senator might cloak himself in pine and musk to remind others of former battles and victories, real or invented. In Byzantium, everyone performed, and scent was the script. But behind the performance was something deeper, something ancient, the belief that scent could hold the essence of a soul. When people traveled, they brought vials of home scent with them, herbs from their village, dried flowers from their mother's garden, even a piece of cloth soaked in their lover's perfume. These were not luxuries. They were anchors, proof that they came from somewhere, that they belonged to someone. Scent in this way defied distance. One merchant, traveling from Antioch to Trebizond, carried with him a wooden box lined with olive leaves and filled with cotton soaked in narrowly. He opened it each night before sleep. Not because it masked the dust of the road, but because it reminded him of his wife, the garden they had tended, the nights they had shared. It was said he died with the box in his hands. There is something profoundly human in that image. A man clutching scent, not wealth. A memory, not a weapon. Byzantium was full of such contradictions. A world where monks wore hair shirts but burned incense. Where emperors blessed their swords with rose oil. Where lovers used scent to seduce and widows used it to survive. Where a woman might use jasmine to charm a suitor or to poison him. It was never just about beauty. Scent was political, spiritual, personal, subversive. It was a code, and everyone in the empire was trying to read it, write it, or erase it. In the monasteries hidden high among the hills, far from the noise and opulence of the capital, another kind of perfumery took shape, one stripped of seduction, one steeped in sacred intention. Here, monks distilled oils not for pleasure, but for healing. They believed scent could mend what medicine could not, that the breath of certain herbs could drive away melancholy, calm the sleepless, or even purge a soul darkened by sin. Their formulas were simple: lavender for clarity, mint for courage, marjoram for grief. But their methods were exacting. Every flower was picked at dawn, every root washed in spring water, every oil stored in shadow for weeks before use. The perfumes they made had no names, only uses. A small jar labeled, for mourning. Another, for mothers who bleed. And one, always locked in a box of cedarwood, marked only with a cross for the possessed. We do not know the ingredients. We know only that when opened, even the birds fell silent. In Byzantium, scent was not decoration. It was presence. Force. A whisper made flesh. There are scrolls, brittle with age, faded by time, that speak of perfumes used in miracles. A blind man who smelled frankincense for the first time after years of darkness and wept. A dying woman who inhaled rose oil and smiled before slipping into silence. A child who stopped screaming when the air was filled with spikenard and warm milk. Were these miracles? Or coincidence? The Byzantines did not ask. They accepted that some things were beyond question. And perfume, invisible, fleeting, powerful, was one of them. Even their concept of the afterlife was fragrant. Icons depicting paradise often showed gardens blooming not just with color, but with scent. Lilies for purity. Hyacinths for memory. Wild thyme for joy. The saints, they believed, smelled sweet not because they wore perfume, but because holiness had a scent of its own. A fragrance born of fire, suffering, and grace. This belief created a strange custom. When a person died and their body did not decompose, but instead began to emit a sweet, unidentifiable fragrance, they were called myrrhablites, those who pour forth myrrh. Their tombs became pilgrimage sites. Their clothes, soaked in this mysterious scent, were cut into relics. People traveled hundreds of miles to touch a scrap of perfumed linen to smell what they called the breath of heaven. Science offers no easy explanation. But in Byzantium, faith did not require proof. It required awe. And awe, more often than not, began with scent. There was one such saint, Euphemia, whose tomb was said to exude the aroma of violets every year on the day of her martyrdom. Visitors swore they could smell her presence long before they reached the chapel. It wasn't overwhelming. It was soft, like a memory you couldn't place. A scent that made you feel both homesick and whole. Is it any wonder they believed? They lived in a world where the invisible shaped the visible, where air could carry truth, where fragrance could touch the divine. And in that world, every vial of perfume, every garland, every oil-soaked cloth was more than matter. It was meaning. In the private quarters of the empress, where the world's noise could not reach, scent became ceremony. Each morning was a ritual, not rushed, not casual. The perfuming of her body was an act of state and of soul. It began in silence. Attendants, trained for years, moved like dancers. One brought warm rose water to cleanse the hands. Another unrolled a length of cloth soaked in orange blossom to wrap around her neck. A third stood ready with a flask of ambergris oil, thick, golden, mysterious. It was not just about applying fragrance. It was about invoking an idea that the empress was more than mortal. She was Byzantium personified. They rubbed oils behind her knees, between her fingers, under her breasts. Not out of indulgence, but out of symbolism. Each place had meaning. Each scent a message. Clove for strength. Myrtle for fidelity. Violet for grace. Even her crown was anointed, the fabric inside perfumed with crushed bay leaves and iris root so that, when worn, it exhaled confidence. The empress's perfume changed with the seasons. In spring, she wore delicate scents, elderflower, pear, and hyacinth. In summer, citrus and mint. Autumn brought in resin, cinnamon, and the darker notes of earth. Winter was her most potent blend, black pepper, frankincense, and the rare, pungent oil of labdanum harvested from the beards of goats that grazed on cistus bushes. No scent was chosen for vanity. Every blend was discussed with astrologers, physicians, and theologians. If she was to announce a new law, she wore fir and bergamot to command clarity. If she mourned, she wore olive oil scented with juniper, the perfume of ancient grief. If she entered a church, she wore something near scentless, humility in a bottle. The empress was not alone in this. Nobility, clergy, artists, and even soldiers understood the weight of scent. Before battle, generals were known to apply a special blend of cedarwood, crushed garlic, and pine to steel the nerves to keep the blood hot. Some said it made men fearless. Others said it masked the scent of fear. But perhaps the most unusual use of perfume in Byzantium was as testimony. In court, certain trials involved scent as a kind of witness. A fabric stained with perfume might be presented to prove intimacy. A chambermaid might testify that the accused wore a scent too fine for her class, implying bribes or seduction. The fragrance one wore could damn or save. One case tells of a stolen vial, a perfume known only to the imperial kitchens, made from green almond, crushed lemon rind, and wild thyme. It had gone missing. Months later, it was smelled on the collar of a merchant during a feast. The scent gave him away. He confessed under pressure. In Byzantium, your scent could betray you. This was not a culture that treated perfume as mere luxury. It was record, reputation, identity. Scent told stories when lips stayed closed. And some stories were meant to remain secret. There were whispers of a perfumer within the palace walls who could create a scent that mimicked another's, a duplication so precise it could be used to impersonate, to seduce, to destroy. It was said the skill was used only once, during a plot to unseat an empress, and that the perfumer vanished soon after, his name erased from every scroll. But not from memory. The tale was passed down in scented hints. A certain blend of saffron and leather that made old courtiers glance over their shoulders. A perfume that should not have returned, but did. In Byzantium, memory often arrived not through books, but through the nose. There is a peculiar ache that comes with remembering a scent you can no longer smell. Byzantines knew this feeling intimately. That's why they wrote of perfumes as if they were ghosts, things that haunted cloth, lingered in corridors, lived longer than people. And sometimes they were right. Ancient jars have been uncovered in the ruins of Constantinople. Tiny glass vessels, sealed with wax, buried for centuries. When opened, some still carry traces of their original perfume, faint but unmistakable. Notes of resin, of crushed leaves, of something floral and distant. Not just history, but emotion trapped in amber. One archaeologist wept when he opened a jar and smelled what he described as the breath of a forgotten woman. He didn't know her name, but he felt her. Through scent. That was Byzantium's quiet magic. Its people understood that perfume could transcend time, not by accident but by design. The most skilled perfumers, often cloistered behind monastery walls or hidden within market labyrinths, devoted their lives to creating scents that could last forever. They experimented with fixatives, myrrh, benzoin, and storax, sticky resins that slowed evaporation and deepened aroma. They soaked raw materials in oil for weeks, even months. They aged perfumes like wine, believing that time itself was an ingredient. These artisans were not celebrated. Often, their names were never known beyond a whispered circle. But their work traveled past from hand to hand, cloth to cloth, century to century. One vial, found in the grave of a noblewoman near the Sea of Marmara, still contained traces of spikenard and honey blossom. Not a common blend. Experts believe it was a custom perfume, likely created to remind her of a specific memory, perhaps a garden or a lover's breath. She had it buried with her. Not jewels. Not coins. Scent. Even the purist in Byzantium tried to leave behind a fragrance. Some tucked dried herbs into their sleeves. Others perfumed their children's clothing before sending them off to marry or to war. One preserved letter, written by a mother to her daughter, reads, "I send with this myrrh-soaked ribbon, so when you miss my hands, you may smell them instead." Scent filled the spaces where words failed. It filled temples, too. Byzantine churches were perfumed not only by incense but by generations of breath, oil, and ash. The walls absorbed prayers. The floors soaked in anointing oils. The very air held memory. Monks claimed they could sense what feast day it was simply by the lingering fragrance: rose on Marian days, frankincense on holy days, and in Lent, the bitter bite of wormwood and smoke. The sacred was not separate from the sensual. God was not fragranceless. Some hymns even spoke of the divine as aroma, the sweet breath of salvation, the scent of the eternal garden. And in visions, saints often described heaven not by what they saw, but by what they smelled. One mystic wrote, "I awoke in the dark, but I knew God was near, for the air was thick with lilies and wine." This connection between scent and spirit created strange customs. When a child was baptized, the oil used was thick with perfume, a blend of rose, cinnamon, and laurel, so that the first thing their soul touched was beauty. The priest would whisper a prayer and pour the oil down the baby's spine. "Let the scent be your shield," he said. "Let the world know who you are." And perhaps the world remembered. Or perhaps the scent did. Byzantium's streets were a symphony of scents, some sweet, others pungent, many layered like an intricate tapestry. Walking through Constantinople was to walk through a living perfume shop where every corner held a new note. Markets overflowed with fragrant goods, bundles of dried lavender, sacks of cinnamon bark, vats of rosewater, and tiny bottles filled with golden oils. Merchants boasted of rare imports, ambergris from the distant seas, costly frankincense from the Arabian deserts, or exotic musk from deep within India's jungles. Each was a treasure, a whisper of faraway lands bottled and sealed. Yet the true artistry lay not just in the raw materials but in how they were combined. Byzantine perfumers were alchemists of scent, blending bitter herbs with sweet blossoms, smoky resins with fresh citrus. Their recipes were guarded secrets, passed down through generations, often recorded only in coded scrolls or memorized by heart. One famous blend, known simply as the Emperor's Breath, was said to evoke the majesty of the imperial throne itself. It combined spicy saffron with cool bergamot and a trace of wild iris, an intoxicating fragrance meant to command respect and awe. To wear it was to declare power without words. But perfume was more than power or luxury. It was a vital part of daily life and personal expression. A Byzantine nobleman might choose a heavy, earthy scent to show his wealth and status during council meetings. A young woman attending a festival would prefer a light, floral fragrance to hint at innocence and grace. Even children were sometimes dabbed with a gentle blend of chamomile and honey to soothe and protect. And in the intimate moments of life, weddings, births, prayers, perfume was never far away. However, the making of these scents was no easy task. It required patience, skill, and reverence. Flowers and herbs had to be picked at precise times, sometimes at dawn, when their oils were richest, or on certain holy days to capture sacred energies. Extraction methods varied. Some ingredients were cold-pressed, others simmered slowly to release their essence. The final perfume was often aged in clay or glass containers, left to mature until the balance was just right. Mistakes could be disastrous. A single bad batch could ruin an entire year's harvest of precious ingredients, or worse, cause illness if improperly prepared. There are accounts of poorly made perfumes causing skin burns or headaches, a reminder that scent was as much science as art. Despite these risks, Byzantine society placed immense value on perfume. It was woven into religion, politics, and daily rituals alike. To understand Byzantine perfumes is to glimpse the soul of an empire, its beauty, its contradictions, its desires, and its mysteries. Among the Byzantine elite, perfume was not only a personal adornment but a social currency. Gift-giving ceremonies often involved presenting carefully crafted fragrances, each carrying layers of meaning beyond mere scent. A vial of rare myrrh could symbolize alliance, a blend of jasmine and pine might convey respect or mourning. These aromatic tokens were carefully chosen to communicate feelings that words alone could not express. Empresses maintained personal perfumers, masters of their craft who lived within the palace walls. These artisans wielded enormous influence, shaping not only the empress's image but also the subtle politics of the court. A carefully timed release of a particular scent during an audience or banquet could sway opinions, soften tensions, or assert dominance without a single spoken word. But even outside imperial walls, common folk understood the power of fragrance. Markets thrived on the trade of perfumes and scented oils, and vendors offered custom blends for every occasion, from weddings and baptisms to funerals and healing rituals. Women, especially, developed intimate relationships with their perfumes, considering them extensions of their identity and allure. The making of perfume was deeply intertwined with Byzantine spirituality. Many believed that scent could ward off evil spirits or invite divine protection. Oils infused with frankincense and myrrh were commonly used in religious rites and personal anointing, linking the physical and the spiritual worlds. Perfume became a bridge between mortal existence and the sacred realm. Within this context, beauty rituals took on profound significance. Byzantine women did not simply apply perfume as decoration, they engaged in carefully crafted ceremonies to enhance their natural beauty and express their inner selves. They would prepare fragrant baths infused with rose petals, lavender, and chamomile, each chosen not only for scent but for their calming, healing properties. After the bath, the application of scented oils served both to moisturize the skin and to cloak the wearer in a veil of allure and mystery. Cosmetics complemented perfume in the pursuit of beauty. Women used crushed minerals and plant extracts to tint their cheeks and eyes, often scenting these mixtures to create a harmonious sensory experience. This attention to detail reflected an understanding that beauty was multisensory, a dialogue between sight, touch, and smell. Yet, these beauty rituals also carried social weight. To present oneself with the right fragrance and appearance was to navigate Byzantine society's intricate codes of class, virtue, and desirability. Women of higher status had access to rare ingredients and skilled perfumers, distinguishing them from those of lower ranks. However, even among commoners, the desire to use scent and beauty practices was strong, a testament to the universal human longing for recognition and connection. Throughout Byzantine history, perfume and beauty were not mere indulgences but essential elements of cultural identity. They revealed deep truths about power, faith, and the human need to be seen and remembered. Byzantine society was steeped in paradox, and nowhere was this more evident than in their relationship with scent and beauty. On the surface, the empire celebrated luxury and opulence with silks, jewels, and perfumes adorning the powerful. Yet beneath this gleam lay a world of restraint, symbolism, and profound spiritual significance. Consider the paradox of the empress's perfume, a blend that had to be both intoxicating and modest, commanding attention without arrogance. The scent was a language, a delicate balance between seduction and sanctity. It spoke of power, yes, but also of duty and divine right. This duality extended to the rituals of personal care. Women bathed regularly, often in public bathhouses, where fragrance played a vital role. The steam was heavy with the aroma of herbs and flowers, mingling with the chatter and laughter. Yet bathing was also a ritual cleansing, a preparation for prayer, marriage, or social engagement. Perfume was applied carefully afterward, marking the transition from cleansing to presentation, from private to public. But what did this mean for identity? In Byzantium, scent was not fixed. It was fluid, shifting with time, place, and circumstance. A woman might wear one perfume during the day, light and fresh to convey innocence, and another at night, deep and spicy to evoke mystery. Men, too, adapted their scents to different roles: the warrior, the courtier, the lover. This mutability challenged the very notion of a stable self. What did it mean to be you when your fragrance could be rewritten each hour? Some scholars argue that Byzantines understood identity as performance, that the layers of scent, dress, and behavior were masks worn to navigate a complex social world. Perfume was part of this mask, a sensory signature that could be altered, hidden, or revealed as needed. This idea reveals a tension at the heart of Byzantine life, the desire to express individuality within a culture deeply invested in conformity and hierarchy. Yet, even as perfume was a tool of self-fashioning, it was also a marker of connection to family, community, faith. Scents tied people together. The smell of a particular flower might recall a childhood garden, the aroma of a resin might evoke a shared ritual. These connections created invisible threads linking the personal to the communal, the earthly to the divine. In this way, perfume was more than scent. It was memory and meaning made tangible. Perfume in Byzantium was deeply entwined with the seasons, marking the passage of time not only in calendars but in the very air people breathed. Each season brought its own palette of scents, carefully harvested and blended to reflect nature's rhythms and spiritual cycles. Spring was a time of renewal. The air was alive with the fragrance of blossoming jasmine, lilac, and orange flower. Gardens around Constantinople bloomed in riotous color and scent, and perfumers raced to capture the fleeting essence of early morning dew on petals. Rosewater was distilled in abundance, its sweet aroma believed to bring healing and joy after the cold, dark months. Summer called for lighter, fresher scents. Citrus fruits like lemon and bergamot were prized for their coolness, as were herbs such as mint and basil. These aromas lifted spirits and provided respite from the heat. Bathhouses infused their waters with these refreshing oils, creating spaces of rejuvenation where citizens could escape the city's bustle. Autumn was rich and complex, a time for deeper, warmer fragrances. Cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg were brought from far lands and combined with local resins like myrrh and labdanum. These scents evoked the harvest's abundance and the approach of darker days, wrapping the city in a cozy, introspective veil. Winter was marked by smoky, resinous perfumes. Frankincense and pine were common, filling homes and churches with their sacred, purifying smoke. These scents were thought to protect against illness and evil spirits during the cold months when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was believed to be thinnest. Beyond these seasonal customs, certain religious festivals demanded unique perfumes. The Feast of the Theotokos, for example, was celebrated with the burning of rose and violet incense, while the Feast of St. Nicholas might involve fragrances of sandalwood and amber. Even the markets reflected these cycles, with vendors adjusting their offerings to the season's needs and desires. Women knew to refresh their personal perfumes as the year turned, aligning their scent with nature's ebb and flow. This intimate connection between scent and season gave Byzantium a living rhythm, a fragrant calendar that shaped how people experienced time, memory, and meaning. It was as if the very essence of life was distilled into droplets of perfume, capturing not just fragrance but the soul of the empire itself. The craft of perfume making in Byzantium was shrouded in mystery and skill, blending the practical with the mystical. Perfumers were part scientist, part artist, and part magician, entrusted with secrets that could transform raw ingredients into fleeting wonders. The process began long before the mixing. Ingredients had to be carefully sourced, some locally, others from distant lands via the vast trade networks that connected Constantinople to Arabia, India, and beyond. Spices like cinnamon and cloves arrived from the east, while precious resins such as frankincense and myrrh were gifts from desert lands. Flowers were picked at dawn, their petals dew-laden and bursting with essence. Perfumers used several extraction methods to capture the soul of each plant or resin. Cold pressing was common for citrus fruits, gently squeezing the rind to release delicate oils. More intricate techniques involved enfleurage, spreading petals on fat to absorb their scent over days, or steam distillation, which required skill and precision. Once extracted, oils were blended carefully. The ratios mattered. A slight shift could turn a sweet perfume sour or a subtle floral note into an overpowering stench. These blends were often infused with fixatives like benzoin or ambergris to preserve the scent longer on the skin. But beyond the chemistry lay the artistry. Perfumers had to understand how scents evolved over time. A perfume's top notes might be bright and fresh, but its heart and base notes developed gradually, lingering hours after application. This unfolding story of scent was like a narrative told through the nose, one that could evoke memories, desires, or warnings. Perfumers themselves often trained for years, apprenticed under masters who guarded their recipes jealously. Many were monks or members of secret guilds, their knowledge passed down orally to protect against theft. There were dangers too. Some ingredients were toxic if handled improperly, and failed batches could cause skin irritation or illness. But the greatest risk was political. A perfumer's skill could sway fortunes, and accusations of poison or sabotage were not unheard of. Despite this, perfumers held a revered position. They were creators of beauty and mystery, wielding invisible power in an empire where scent was language, identity, and influence. The allure of Byzantine perfumes extended beyond mere personal use. They played a crucial role in rituals of healing and protection. Medicine and scent were intertwined, with fragrant oils believed to possess the power to cure ailments and guard against malevolent forces. Physicians and apothecaries often prescribed aromatic balms and unguents as part of treatment. Lavender, rose, and chamomile were favored for their calming properties, used to soothe fever, ease pain, and promote restful sleep. Peppermint and eucalyptus offered relief for respiratory troubles, their sharp scents clearing the airways and invigorating the senses. But the mystical dimension of perfume was just as important. Many Byzantines believed that certain scents could repel the evil eye or drive away spirits. Oils infused with garlic, rue, or juniper were worn or burned in homes during times of sickness or uncertainty. The boundaries between medicine, magic, and religion blurred in these fragrant practices. One striking example comes from a story of a noblewoman who, facing a serious illness, surrounded herself with rare perfumes and incense. It was said that the very scent lifted her spirits and strengthened her will to live, intertwining mind and body in the fight against disease. This connection between scent and health reveals how deeply perfume was woven into the fabric of Byzantine life. It was not simply an adornment but a source of comfort, protection, and hope. Even funeral rites were suffused with fragrance. The dead were anointed with scented oils, frankincense, myrrh, and other resins to prepare their souls for the journey beyond. The air around tombs and churches carried these aromas, creating a sacred atmosphere that bridged the world of the living and the dead. Through these rituals, perfume became a language of life and death, healing and transition, binding the physical and spiritual in an endless dance. Behind every drop of Byzantine perfume lay stories of journeys, of spices crossing deserts and seas, of caravans braving dangers, and of merchants weaving through bustling bazaars. The very existence of these fragrances depended on the empire's place at the crossroads of trade. Constantinople was the beating heart of this network, a city alive with the chatter of languages, the clink of coins, and the hum of negotiation. Merchants from Egypt, Persia, India, and beyond brought exotic ingredients, their goods wrapped in layers of mystery and promise. These spices and resins were more than commodities, they were symbols of wealth and power. To possess a rare scent was to declare access to the farthest reaches of the known world. An emperor's perfumed robes were a statement not only of status but of dominion over a vast empire. Yet the journey from source to bottle was fraught with challenges. Pirates lurked in the Aegean and bandits ambushed caravans along desert routes. Losses were common, making some ingredients extraordinarily precious and, therefore, more potent in their symbolism. The trade in perfumes and their raw materials also influenced diplomacy. Gifts of rare scents could open doors between rival courts or seal alliances. Conversely, controlling access to these fragrances was a form of political power in itself. Within this global web, Byzantium excelled not only as a consumer but as a creator. Its perfumers refined and transformed imported ingredients into unique blends, melding Eastern opulence with Mediterranean subtleties. This synthesis mirrored the empire's larger identity, a culture both ancient and cosmopolitan, rooted in tradition but open to the world. Perfume, in this sense, was more than fragrance, it was a testament to Byzantium's place in history and its enduring allure. The art of perfume in Byzantium was inseparable from its cultural and religious symbolism. Aromas were woven into the fabric of worship, ceremony, and daily life, creating a multisensory experience that connected the earthly and the divine. Churches were filled with the smoke of incense, an aromatic veil that both masked earthly odors and symbolized prayers rising to heaven. Frankincense and myrrh, two of the most precious resins, were burned in elaborate rituals, their scent evoking sacred mysteries and eternal truths. Byzantine theology saw fragrance as a reflection of spiritual purity and divine presence. The use of perfumes and oils in baptism, anointing, and other sacraments was not simply ornamental but a physical manifestation of grace and blessing. At the same time, the sensory power of scent was recognized as a potential threat. Overindulgence in perfume could lead to vanity or distraction from spiritual focus. Thus, moderation was emphasized. Perfume was to enhance, not overpower. This tension between sensuality and sanctity permeated Byzantine attitudes toward beauty itself. To be beautiful was to mirror divine order, but excessive pride was condemned. Perfume became a metaphor for this balance, a gift from God to be used wisely. This dynamic played out in personal rituals. A noblewoman's morning bath might begin with the blessing of scented waters, a moment of contemplation before the day's duties. The application of perfume was both an act of self-care and spiritual preparation. In this way, perfume bridged the material and immaterial, offering a tangible link to the unseen world. The scent of Byzantium was thus not just a luxury, it was a language of faith, identity, and human longing. The relationship between perfume and power in Byzantium was complex and deeply symbolic. Emperors and high-ranking officials understood that scent could influence perception, sway emotions, and even manipulate political outcomes. Imagine a grand audience chamber filled with courtiers, the air heavy with the aroma of rare spices and flowers. The emperor's presence was not just visual but olfactory, his robes imbued with scents that spoke of conquest, wisdom, and divine favor. This invisible aura was part of the spectacle of rule, an extension of authority beyond words or weapons. Perfume also played a strategic role in diplomacy. Envoys carried fragrant gifts meant to impress or intimidate foreign rulers. The choice of scent was calculated, sweet and inviting to suggest peace, sharp and exotic to warn of strength. Yet this power came with risk. The same perfumes that conveyed status could also mask poisons or signal hidden threats. Court intrigue often involved coded messages through scent, a secret language understood only by the initiated. Beyond the political sphere, perfume shaped personal relationships. A lover's fragrance could evoke longing or jealousy, create bonds or suspicion. The intimate use of scent became a tool for seduction and deception alike. These layers of meaning made perfume a double-edged sword, beautiful and dangerous, personal and political. In understanding Byzantium, recognizing the power of scent reveals a dimension of history often overlooked, where fragrance was weapon, shield, and signature all at once. Byzantine beauty rituals extended far beyond mere aesthetics. They were profound ceremonies infused with meaning, discipline, and cultural expectations. Every step from bathing to perfuming, from makeup to attire, was a deliberate act woven into the social fabric. Women prepared their bodies and spirits with scented oils and powders, not just to please others but to assert their place in society. The application of rosewater or jasmine oil was akin to donning armor, a fragrant shield protecting them against gossip, envy, and hardship. Bathhouses were social hubs where women shared secrets, exchanged recipes, and performed these rituals collectively. The steam and scent enveloped them, transforming the mundane into a moment of transcendence. Yet these rituals were not free from tension. Byzantine women balanced ideals of modesty and allure, public decorum and private desire. Perfume was both a tool and a symbol in this delicate dance, used to attract, to conceal, and to express identity. In a culture where appearances could dictate destiny, scent became a language of survival and empowerment. But beauty was not static. It evolved with age, status, and circumstance. Perfumes chosen in youth gave way to more subdued aromas in maturity. The brightest florals softened into deeper, woodier notes as a woman's role shifted. This progression reflected broader Byzantine values, respect for tradition coupled with acceptance of change. Through these rituals, perfume and beauty were transformed into acts of personal narrative, stories told through scent and ceremony, bridging individual lives with the pulse of an empire. What if I told you that in the heart of the Byzantine Empire, perfume was not just a luxury but a powerful secret weapon, an invisible force that shaped politics, faith, love, and identity? Imagine a world where the air itself spoke stories, whispered secrets, and concealed dangers all through scent. This is the world of Byzantine perfumes, where every drop carried history, power, and mystery. Perfume in Byzantium was an art, a science, and a ritual rolled into one. It began with rare and exotic ingredients that traveled thousands of miles, from the fragrant blossoms of Mediterranean gardens to the spicy resins of faraway deserts. These precious elements were harvested with care, petals picked at dawn, resins scraped by skilled hands, and spices traded along perilous routes. Each ingredient held meaning beyond its scent, carrying associations of health, protection, or social status. The crafting process was both delicate and secretive. Perfumers, often cloaked in mystery, mastered techniques like enfleurage and distillation, capturing the very soul of flowers and spices. They blended oils with fixatives to create perfumes that evolved over hours, telling a scented story that lingered long after the wearer had left. These artisans were not mere craftsmen, they were alchemists and magicians, their formulas jealously guarded and passed down through generations. But perfume was far more than personal adornment. In Byzantine courts, scent was a silent language of power. Emperors and empresses used it to command respect, convey divine favor, and even manipulate alliances. A carefully chosen fragrance could calm a rival or seduce an ally, turning perfume into a tool of diplomacy and intrigue. Courtiers knew that the right scent could open doors or close them forever. Beyond politics, scent was woven into the very fabric of Byzantine spirituality. Churches were filled with the smoke of frankincense and myrrh, connecting the earthly with the divine. Personal rituals of bathing and anointing with oils were acts of purification and preparation, blending physical beauty with spiritual grace. The sweet smell of rosewater or lavender was not just luxury, it was a balm for the soul and a shield against evil. Perfumes also marked the rhythms of life and nature. Different scents celebrated the changing seasons, fresh citrus and mint for summer's heat, deep cinnamon and clove for autumn's warmth, sacred resins for winter's cold. Festivals and religious ceremonies carried unique aromas, creating a fragrant calendar that structured both time and memory. Beauty rituals in Byzantium were powerful statements of identity and survival. Women embraced fragrance not only to captivate but to protect themselves socially and spiritually. Bathhouses became sanctuaries where scents mingled with secrets, where women performed daily acts of empowerment through scent, makeup, and attire. Each perfume was a narrative, an invisible signature telling the world who they were or who they wished to become. Yet behind this glamour lay tensions between sensuality and sanctity, individuality and conformity, appearance and reality. The Byzantine love of perfume was a dance on a knife's edge, balancing desire and restraint, expression and control. This complex relationship reveals something timeless about human nature, our deep longing to be seen, remembered, and connected. In the scented world of Byzantium, perfume was much more than a fleeting pleasure. It was a language, a ritual, a symbol of life itself. So next time you catch a whiff of rose or amber, remember that you're inhaling a story centuries in the making, a story of empire, faith, power, and the eternal quest for beauty. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries of history and uncover stories hidden in plain sight, don't forget to subscribe.